The insistent thump from the ceiling above Elias's bedroom had become a nightly ritual. Tonight was 3 distinct thuds, a short pause, then 2 more. It started subtly, a mere suggestion of sound, easily dismissed as the old building settling. But over the past few weeks, it had grown more pronounced, more deliberate. Elias lay in bed, the thin plaster of the ceiling doing little to muffle the rhythmic disturbance. He'd tried everything: earplugs, white noise, even banging on the ceiling to scare whatever it was away. That only resulted in a prolonged silence, followed by an even more emphatic series of thumps later that night. The apartment building, a converted Victorian house in a less than glamorous part of town, had its share of whispered stories. Drafts where there shouldn't be, the faint sweet scent that occasionally wafted through the hallways, the feeling of being watched even when alone. The thumping could easily be put down as paranormal activity, if you believed in that sort of thing. A floorboard creaking overhead now joined the thumps, followed by a soft scraping sound like something being dragged across the floor. Elias sighed, running a hand through his already disheveled hair. Sleep was becoming a luxury he could rarely afford. He'd mentioned it to his friend, Sarah, during their weekly video call. "Honestly, it's driving me mad. It's like there's someone doing Morse code up there, but with their feet, and sometimes I hear dragging noises." Sarah, ever the pragmatist, had raised an eyebrow on the screen. "Are you sure it's the upstairs apartment? Could it be pipes? Or I don't know, rats?" "Definitely above me," Elias had insisted. "But there isn't an upstairs apartment directly above mine. That's just the attic space where the water tanks and the old wiring are." The landlord said it's mostly empty, just used for the building's utilities. Sarah's voice had taken on a more serious tone. "Elias, this might sound crazy, but have you ever actually been up there? To the attic?" Elias paused, a knot forming in his stomach. He'd moved into the building 3 months ago. He'd seen other residents. A young couple on the ground floor, a quiet elderly woman on the second. But the door to the attic, a plain, unmarked wooden door at the end of the second floor hallway, had always remained closed. He'd never seen the landlord go up there, never heard any activity from it. "Well, no," he'd admitted. "I just assumed it was just utilities, like he said. I checked he wasn't having any work done up there, and he said I can't go look around as it isn't safe." Sarah's brow furrowed. "But if it's just utilities, what's making those noises? And the dragging? Elias, this might sound even crazier, but could someone be living in the attic, hidden away?" Her words hung in the air, a chilling alternative to ghostly visitations. A squatter in the cramped, dusty attic. Someone deliberately concealing their presence in the building's infrastructure? The thought was far more disturbing than any spectral manifestation. A ghost might just rattle chains. A hidden person living amongst the pipes and wires could be unpredictable, potentially dangerous. The thumping continued its relentless rhythm. Thump, thump, thump. Pause. Thump, thump. Tonight, however, there was something different. After the usual sequence, there was a soft cough, muffled but undeniably human. Elias sat bolt upright in bed, his heart pounding. A cough. Ghosts didn't cough. And the attic was only supposed to house inanimate objects. Fear, sharp and cold, replaced his previous annoyance. He wasn't dealing with a haunting. He was dealing with someone. Someone living hidden in the attic space above him. Someone he'd never seen. Someone who moved in the dead of night amongst the building's vital systems. He got out of bed, his bare feet cold on the wooden floor. He crept to his bedroom door, his hand hovering over the handle. As he stood there, Paralyzed by a mixture of fear and uncertainty, a new sound drifted in from the other side of his bedroom door. It was faint, almost inaudible, but it sent a fresh wave of terror through him. It was the soft creak of the spare bedroom door, the one he hadn't touched, slowly being pushed open from the inside. The slow creak of the spare bedroom door opening sent a jolt of pure terror through Elias. He hadn't touched it. He was alone in his apartment, wasn't he? Heart hammering against his ribs, he opened his bedroom door slowly, his eyes fixed on the widening gap. The dim light from the hallway cast long, distorted shadows, making it impossible to see who or what was on the other side. Then, a sliver of movement, a dark shape, low to the ground, edged into view. It wasn't tall enough to be a standing person. It looked like someone crawling. Elias's breath hitched in his throat. Someone was in his apartment. Someone who had been living hidden in the attic and had somehow gained access to his living space. But how? He remembered the layout of the apartment when he'd first viewed it. A small spare bedroom, mostly empty, that he'd used for storage. He'd barely spent any time in there. Could there be a hatch? An access point to the attic that he'd overlooked? The crawling figure moved further into the hallway from the spare bedroom, staying low, its movements unnervingly silent despite being on the wooden floor. Elias could now make out the silhouette more clearly. A hunched form, moving with a strange, almost animalistic grace. Panic seized him. He had to get out. He turned to flee towards the living room and the door out of his apartment, but a soft thud from behind him stopped him dead in his tracks. He whirled back around. The figure had moved with incredible speed and was now blocking the doorway, its head tilted at an unnatural angle. In the dim light, Elias could finally make out some details. Matted, greasy hair hung low over a pale face. Gaunt features with eyes that seemed to glint in the darkness like a nocturnal animal caught in headlights. The figure was thin, almost skeletal, dressed in dirty, ill-fitting clothes that looked like they'd been scavenged. A low guttural sound emanated from the figure's throat, not quite a growl, but something equally unsettling. It took a tentative step closer. Elias's mind raced. The attic, the spare bedroom. He bolted towards the hallway, towards the small room he'd mostly ignored. He fumbled for the light switch, his hand shaking violently. The spare bedroom was as he remembered. Bare walls, a dusty window, a few cardboard boxes stacked in a corner. But then he saw it. In the ceiling, almost perfectly camouflaged against the aged plaster, was a small rectangular hatch. It was slightly ajar, a sliver of deeper darkness visible within. A makeshift rope ladder, thin and frayed, dangled down a few feet. Understanding crashed over him like a wave. The thumping, the dragging, this creature had been living above him, using this hidden access point. But to do what? He heard soft, padding footsteps behind him. The figure was following. Elias scrambled towards the boxes, grabbing the heaviest one he could lift. He turned just as the figure reached the spare bedroom doorway. It moved with a jerky, unnatural speed, its eyes fixed on him with a disturbing intensity. "Stay back," Elias yelled, his voice trembling, hefting the box in front of him like a shield. The figure didn't respond, didn't even seem to register his words. It just continued to advance, its gaze flicking towards the ceiling hatch and then back to Elias. Then, Elias noticed something else. A faint, almost sweet, sickly odor clung to the figure. The same unusual scent he'd occasionally noticed in the hallways. And in its hand, clutched tightly, was his half-eaten apple, the one he'd left on the kitchen counter. A wave of revulsion washed over him. stronger than the fear. This wasn't a ghost. This was a person. A person who had been secretly living in the building's attic, using his apartment as a larder, a place to snoop. The figure lunged, its movements surprisingly swift. Elias swung the box, catching it off balance with a dull thud. The figure stumbled back, letting out a pained wheeze. This was his chance. Elias dropped the box and scrambled towards the dangling rope ladder. He grabbed it, his hands slipping on the frayed fibers. He had to get up there, into the squatter's domain, to understand what was happening, to find a way out. He began to climb, his muscles screaming in protest, his eyes fixed on the dark opening above. Behind him, he could hear the scraping sound of the figure regaining its footing. The unseen tenant was coming for him, and Elias was climbing into the unknown, into the hidden spaces of his own home, where a terrifying secret had been silently unfolding. Hauling himself into the cramped, dusty attic, Elias landed on a rough wooden floor, coughing as a cloud of disturbed dust billowed around him. The space was stifling, the air thick with the smell of mildew, old wiring, and something else. That faint, sickly, sweet odor was stronger here. The only light came from the small hatchway he'd just climbed through, and a few weak shafts filtering through cracks in the boarded-up gable ends. It was enough to make out the clutter of forgotten building materials, discarded furniture draped in cobwebs, and the building's ancient water tanks looming like metallic beasts in the gloom. He scrambled back from the hatch, his heart still pounding, expecting the figure to follow immediately. And it did. Its gaunt face appeared in the opening, its eyes wide and strangely pleading. Elias's fear twisted the expression into something monstrous, inhuman. The way it moved, the silence, the unsettling pallor of its skin. It defied any logic of a normal squatter. The figure pulled itself fully into the attic, moving with that same jerky, unnatural gait. It took a step towards Elias, its hands outstretched, palms open in what looked like a gesture of peace. But Elias's mind, fueled by terror and the shock of the intrusion, refused to interpret it that way. This was something other, something malevolent that had been lurking in the shadows of his home. "Stay back!" Elias choked out again, his voice hoarse. He grabbed a rusty metal pipe lying nearby, wielding it like a weapon. The figure made a soft, whimpering sound, its eyes darting between Elias and the pipe. It took another hesitant step, its lips moving as if trying to speak, but only a series of soft, unintelligible sounds escaped its throat. Elias's fear reached a fever pitch. He saw the gaunt frame advancing, those wide, dark eyes fixed on him, and in his panicked state, he perceived a predatory hunger, a supernatural intent. He swung the pipe with all his might, a desperate, blind act of self-preservation. The metal connected with a sickening thud against the figure's head. The figure staggered, its eyes widening in shock and pain, before collapsing silently onto the dusty floor. Elias stood there, panting, the pipe trembling in his grip, the adrenaline slowly beginning to recede. The silence in the attic was heavy, broken only by his ragged breathing. Slowly, hesitantly, he lowered the pipe and took a step closer to the fallen figure. As his eyes adjusted to the dim light, a horrifying realization began to dawn. The figure's clothes, though dirty and torn, were just clothes. The pallor of its skin looked like malnourishment, not something otherworldly. The strange gait could have been from living in cramped spaces, moving in the dark. And the face, as the dust settled, Elias could see it more clearly. It was thin, yes, almost skeletal, but undeniably human. The eyes, now still and unseeing, held not malice, but a deep-seated fear and a desperate plea. He noticed the thin, almost childlike fingers, still clutching his half-eaten apple. And then he saw it. A small, crudely fashioned sign that must have fallen out of the figure's pocket, made from scraps of cardboard and faded marker. It read, "Will work for food." A wave of nausea and crushing guilt washed over Elias. The thumping, the dragging, the scavenging. It wasn't a monster. It was just a person. A desperate, starving person who had been living hidden in the attic, trying to survive, perhaps too afraid or unable to ask for help. The whimpering sounds, the outstretched hands. They weren't threats. They were attempts to communicate, to placate. He had been so consumed by fear, so ready to believe in the paranormal, that he hadn't seen the desperate humanity in front of him. And in his terror, he had taken a life. Elias stared down at the still form, the weight of his actions crushing him. The silence of the attic now felt accusatory. The truth was undeniable, stark and horrifying. He was alone with a dead body. A body that was just a person. Panic flared anew, different this time, laced with the icy grip of consequence. What had he done? What would happen when the landlord found out? When the police came? He looked at the hatch, his escape route. He could try to explain, but how could he explain his blind, fear-fueled violence? The thought of the consequences, the judgment, a prison cell, filled him with a desperate urge to flee. He could disappear, leave this nightmare behind. The building had other tenants. Maybe the unseen tenant's presence would remain undiscovered for a while. His mind was a whirlwind of terror, guilt, and a desperate instinct for self-preservation. He had a choice to make: face the consequences of his fatal mistake, or run and become another unseen presence in the world, forever haunted by the ghost of the human he had killed.